A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this particular round or this session, there are basically three questions I would be asking one after the other. It doesn't have to be handled by everybody, but I am hoping at the end of it all, everybody has gotten something to contribute, knowing that some are more specialists in certain areas than others. The first question is looking at this subject of what it means to be a man. One scholar was talking about the attributes of Allah. And he said there are some attributes that in human society are generally looked upon as more feminine. Of rahmah, of mawadda, of gentleness, patience and all of that. And there are some attributes that men can easily, especially when it's razak, you are a provider. Now, when it comes to what should a husband's attitude towards family, and particularly the subject of intimacy and emotional expression, vulnerability, intimacy, and connection. Because if that is not done well, however sexy your wife is, if you are angry with her about something she has done, or she is angry with you about something that you have done, and you are trying to avoid discussing those issues, you are not going anywhere with your sexual moves and lighting candles and all of that. And because of how fundamental that is, I would like our panelists to just share some thoughts. You've all been involved in counseling. Some have studied this subject area formally and have spent years, definitely Brother Akande, but I'm not, some it's experience in this area and you learn as you go. But I'd leave it open for whoever wants to start. What would you share regarding not just the importance of, but the how to unlearn, relearn issues surrounding what it means to be a man and showing vulnerability, showing emotions, expressing them in a way that benefits intimacy. So I'm raising it in that context. Who wants to start? Everybody is looking at, okay. And I'll be giving about 15 minutes to the first question, 15 to the second, and to the third.
Firstly, we need to understand that all of us are products of our own childhood, our own experiences. I'm looking at the emotional aspect first. And for some people, it is macho not to show emotion. It is womanish to tear. People say those things. But that's an erroneous assumption. A critical thing is this, and I said this yesterday, we do not see the world as it is, but as we are. We are products of life experiences, of what we've been through. And I want to just share this with you. I grew up in a home where, as I said early on, my father was a martinet, a strict disciplinarian. And I got enough hiding from him because I was a naughty boy. So I will not forget, a few weeks before he passed away, and we became very close. We became like, buddies. I could talk to him. He said to me, Idris, I gave you a lot of hiding. I said, yes, Daddy. He says, but you didn't turn out too bad, So I said, what a relief, right? So thanks for the hiding. But I initiated the hugging, not my father. When I was about 12 or 13 years old, this is very, very important. My mother told me, you know your dad after Fajr, he makes dua of each one of you by name. I said, Daddy, I got a shock of my life. But there was a tipping point which I want to share with you where I initiated this hugging. It's a story of a teacher who was very nervous about his first day at school. And he wondered whether his pupils are going to listen to him. He was nervous. And you will not go to a doctor who's got a sign there, qualified today. Will you go to him? It's unlikely, isn't it? Because what does he know? Or a lawyer. And I recall when I went for my appendicitis operation and the nurses were taking me to the theater, I had no idea who was going to operate me. I did not meet the surgeon. As I entered the operating theater, a friend of mine is standing there and he just qualified as a doctor. So I thought he came to see me, friendly. And he had the look. He that look like, if something happens to you, your father will say it's part of faith, there's no litigation. So I told him, I'm so nice you came to see me. He says, no, you are the first person I'm ever going to operate. No, it happened. I told the nurses, I think I'm feeling bad. Take me back, Anyway, Allah put shifa in his hands, right? So anyway, this teacher was very nervous about his first day at school. Will the pupils listen to me or not? Anyway, there was one girl. She had the outer trappings of beauty, but exceptionally bright. She participated. He said, never mind, I'll teach for her. And 3 weeks, the second semester, she hadn't come back to school. So he asked the registrar, where is this girl? He said, haven't you heard she committed suicide? And he said, I'll not rest until I find out why they are not get to know her better. He went to the home, he met the father and mother, they appeared loving, but none of them ever hugged the child, expressed the love to the child to say, I love you, my baby, I love you, my darling. None of them ever did that. So he began to realize teaching is not only about cognitive development, it's also about the affective, right? It's about also emotions. It's also about going beyond the textbook. So he began to show the students how to show love to your parents. And after one of those classes, he should have it on a weekly basis. One father recounts the story. For me, this was the poignant part, a point that left an indelible impression, where the father says, after one of those classes, my son came home and said to me, Daddy, would you please stand up? I was taken aback by his request. I stood up. My son kissed me on both my cheeks and my forehead, and he said, Daddy, I love you. For the first time my son told me this, I began to cry. And I asked my son, why are you telling me this now? And my son replied, must I tell you when you are dead? That immediately, I came across this in 1979, around August, and I phoned my father. He was staying in another town, and his response was the same. From that day onwards, whenever I saw my father, I used to hug him. You understand? Now you find people have said the following, that if couples have what you call emotional intelligence, there is a great chance that the marriage will survive more than any other marriages. And we need to talk about that. We need to talk about expressing one's emotion. We need to speak about showing your love, because a lot of kids grow up today what I call emotional deprivation. They do not know how to show their emotions. It's often suffocated. So that's one part of it. But when it comes to the whole issue of intimacy, there is also the notion intimacy is only about the bedroom. That's it, intimate, right? And we men are different, in many, many ways. What do women want? Women want to feel warmth. They want to feel someone that is more nurturing, someone that sees things holistically. Your wife would find it romantic that the fact that when she shares with you how a day was spent, you listen to her without interruption. That alone for her makes her feel feel very, very good. So I think it's very, very important that because we tend to be somewhat chauvinistic, we often stifle the voices of our spouses, that we not allow them to initiate things, we not even ask them. Sometimes we live in a fool's paradise. You think you're the man, I satisfy my woman, man. You know what I mean? I'm virile and those kinds of things about that image that you have. But you find that when women, and I know this from counseling, and sometimes when I'll ask the couples, tell me about your intimacy. So he would say, no, I think it's great, And for the first time he hears his wife says that I find it frustrating. And he gets a shock of his life because you did not give them an opportunity to talk about it. So the long and short of it all, what I'm saying essentially, that we need to reignite our relationship with our spouses, to rejuvenate it, and to elicit their opinions about these sensitive aspects, which are very, very critical. It's a fundamental pillar of your marriage.
Thank you. Just before I go for the next, just so that we're all on the same page. So this first round of questions, we've got another 7 minutes, is looking at this issue of emotional expression and connection. The second is going to be on challenges to do with that, particularly when it comes to sexual intimacy. What are some of the challenges, the dysfunctional issues, premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, just afraid to ask or not knowing how to ask. So those areas, or maybe she finds it hurtful, what would be advice for this? And the third question would deal with more wrapping up. What would you advise for husbands who want to experience mind-blowing sexual intimacy? Let me put it that way. So, carry on. And then.
Like Uncle Idris just said, we human beings, we are the sum of our experiences. And oftentimes we go into marriage with those experiences, which is nil, because we don't have that experience. I had the opportunity of having a father who was very liberal when it comes to those aspects, and he would sit me down and tell me things that he was doing wrong. The first lesson, or I should say awareness, that came to me is, how do I do things differently from my father? Because he would tell me things that were wrong. He didn't go in the intimacy side, of course, because of course, father and son relationship, but what wasn't working well in the marriage. And like previous speakers, Mustafa, Habib, and even Uncle Idris, Rasulullah as an example, and to ask or read about how did he handle it. Now, talking about intimacy, how do you initiate intimacy and so on and so forth, foreplay, as we think about it, is kind of physical, and it can't be physical. Like Uncle Idris said, it's mental. Someone earlier talked about what women like, which is like opening their doors and so on and so forth. My wife talks about love languages, which is asking your spouse, having a conversation. What is your love language? Her love language cannot be what you define it to be. It has to be what she wants it to be. This is where we have a problem. Because oftentimes on these subject matters, the women are far better read than the men. And when they start saying, okay, this is my love language, that's the one into Allah, what do you mean by that? But that's the reality. And we don't want to rise to their level. And quite honestly, I'm going to be very brutal. Wallahi, we end up munik awyawa aura. Because we've not opened our minds to learn about these things. So when I got married to Maryam, and I've said this on some of the interviews we've had, there is no shyness. It is you and your wife. Sit down and have a conversation. Seriously. So take off that garb, that superiority, something, whatever it is you call it. This is your wife. You're naked together. And what did our brothers say? Each one of you is entitled to pleasure and intimacy. It's not your sole right. And again, this is where we make a mistake. You don't have a conversation. You don't talk to her. You don't say, you have to ask, what do you enjoy? I'm sorry, gentlemen, that's the reality. You don't come and switch off the light, take off your gun, and then you jump in bed. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Because if you don't do that, wallahi kunna cin haƙƙinsu, you are committing a sin and Allah will hold you accountable. It's not your right alone. She has as much right in that department as you do. And have a conversation, talk, ask. Issues to do with difficulty. Sometimes stress in life, we have problems. I'm going to be frank, we can't get it up. Financial stresses, other kind of problems. Family is sick, mother is not well, your mind is somewhere. Doesn't mean she doesn't have needs though. It doesn't eliminate her needs. There are times where you have to say, I haven't been as loving, as intimate as I should be. This is the challenge I'm facing. So I would appreciate you please being considerate. Bear with me. I know it's your right. You have to have those conversations. And I want to say something. We get older. Physical strength, whatever, stamina changes. The challenge many of us seem to run into, as we're getting a little bit wilty, they're getting a little stronger. So what do? Conversation. Talk. No shyness. Is it embarrassing to you? Yeah, it is. How do I do it? Well, I got to think about it. And then if you can't do it face to face, honey, I really want to discuss this with you, but I don't know how to do it. Send her a WhatsApp message. Communicate. But don't keep quiet. You can't. And these are the things I want us to be aware of. Well, we don't do that kind of thing. Hey, the danger is, and I'll say this, there is something very dangerous happening in this town. Very dangerous. We are abandoning our wives. Guess what? Our wives are not waiting for us. They have the resources, they have the means, they have the ability, they go out and they get men. For those of us who don't know, wake up. And when time comes for Allah to ask, remember, your wife stepped out, she's doing this, she's doing that. I've had situations in this town, men abandoning their wives for 6 months, even for a year, some even 3. Do you think, in all honesty, they will sit around waiting for you? Do we think so, honestly? No. Wallahi. That's J412, or for you. That's they are shopping. Do you know young boys line up those aisles knowing there are women wanting to pick them up? These are our wives, Muslim women. What Brother Nu is saying, because when time comes for questioning, whatever it is they do or they've done, Allah will ask why. Your name is going to come up. You are the reason. You ignored your responsibilities towards them. You never asked. You didn't care. I know somebody who said, the women, they are so heavy these days. I'm no longer attracted. Oh, really? You think you're attractive? What makes you attractive? Your money. You're nothing to them. You're a bank account. You're an ATM. And I've told men, when a woman gets heavy, did she just breathe air and get heavy? Didn't she bear you children? Didn't the body change because of that? Here we're talking with Uncle Idris is saying, and Brother Mustafa also said, your sadaqah jariyah. When a woman has children, and I talked about even those who were not educated and so on, you have a responsibility to grow together. When you're younger, like Mariam will joke, oh, we can swing from the chandeliers. We get a little older, you go swinging from the chandelier, you end up getting a sprained back. So, stay away from the chandelier because the age is different right now. So you come up with a different system, but you talk about it. You have a conversation. There's no shame in you and your wife saying, how do we change this style so that we're both satisfied, in this department? It's between you and your wife. But the dumb thing some of us do? He can go discuss the same nonsense with his friends in the chamber. We do that. You sit with your friend, oh, really? I wonder if your friend will be an intercession come Judgment Day when you are being asked those questions about those things you did. Let's stop this nonsense and live up to our responsibility of being husbands and what we are supposed to give our wives. This thing I'm saying, wallahi, tell your friends, this is what is happening in this town by women who are financially sound and do not need your money. And they pay these young men the way you comfortably think, I'll just pay the girls and they'll come. Well, they're doing it too, thanks to you. Because you taught them.
Jazakallahu khairan. I think that was an important wake-up call for some. And I would say takeaway, you can't over-communicate. You can't over-communicate. The more you have a pulse on each other and you know what's going on, the better for either of you. On the issue of being emotional and being vulnerable, just reminded me of something you see among scholars who discuss diseases of the heart. That one of the symptoms of a heart that is diseased is what they call jumud al-ayn, the dryness of the eyes, the inability to cry. That the ability to cry, and the Prophet cried on a number of occasions, the ability to cry, whether in salat, whether in whatever, but just the ability to cry is very often, there's fake crying, there's crocodile tears, there's all of that. There are some people who are just emotional, but generally the ability to cry is viewed as a sign of a healthy heart. What's interesting is actually from the medical perspective, one of the primary hormones responsible for stress and depression is cortisol. But what they are finding is when they look at the composition of tears, tears contain cortisol, they contain 3 other hormones, and the theory that seems to be coming up is that, and I think people notice that when you are stressed, when you cry, you actually feel a bit better after. That cries are actually good for you. And so they actually would say a tear a day keeps the psychiatrist away. Yeah, it's not bad, it's not unmanly. I would move on to the next question, which is to do with challenges when it comes to intimacy. Some challenges you don't know how to ask. Other challenges you've got in your head what it should be. That if I am in the sexual act, I should last for 30 minutes. Why am I tired after 3 minutes or 5 minutes? She must be unsatisfied. Or Oga will not wake up and do what is required to do. You don't have an erection that will last the foreplay. Before you know it, it's premature ejaculation. And after that, you're finished. You're tired, you feel embarrassed and just deflated. And there are many other of these challenges. What are those most common challenges you've come across, and what advice would you share?
I'll add my contribution now so then I can retire and listen to Habib for the rest of But this was something that I touched on yesterday in my discussion, where I was speaking about the effects of infidelity on the quality of intimacy. And when I was speaking about infidelity, the word in Arabic for infidelity is zina. And I mentioned that zina isn't just limited to the actual physical act, but there is a zina of the eye, there is a zina of the heart, etc. And there's something that's developed in modern society that never existed in the societies previous to us, even if we look in our parents' and our grandparents' generation, depending on how old you are. Before I go into that, actually, I'll think about yesterday. Sheikh Nuruddin quoted a hadith from a scholar called, from a Sahaba, called Amr ibn As. So Amr ibn al-As had a son called Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As, and he's one of the Sahaba that has many ahadith, and his hadith are extremely beneficial, and he's one of the 4 Abdullahs who were the foundation of Islamic law because of how much they took from the Prophet ﷺ, along with Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Zubair. The age difference between Amr bin As and his son Abdullah ibn Amr bin As was 11 years. The age difference between the father and son was 11 years. Why? Because he got married at the age of 10 and he became a father at the age of 11. Why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because in ancient societies, you began to be sexually intimate and you began to establish families and you began to get married the moment that you hit puberty and the moment that you were able to be financially responsible for your wife. And so in traditional societies, this concept of being a teenager or even being a young adult, etc., didn't exist. You're either a child or you're an adult. You're a sabi or you're a mukallaf. And when you become a mukallaf, if you look in all of the books of fiqh, all of us were mostly probably Malikis, you've studied Al-Akhdari or you've studied Ibn Ashir, the signs of you becoming an adult are the growth of pubic hair, the emission of seminal fluid for women, period, etc. And so people's sexual lives would begin at that time. And that would be around the age of 12, 13, 14. And this has been the case for mankind for thousands of years. Then when the Industrial Revolution came, even if you look at, Victorian times, you saw children working. I don't know if you've ever seen those movies. What was the movie Mary Poppins where the kids are sweeping the chimneys, etc.? As soon as you were 10, 11, 12, you hit puberty, you're sent out to work and earn a living. You're an adult. You're no longer considered a child. And then when the Industrial Revolution came in the 19th century, it changed the entire function of society. And then even with the introduction of the new education system that we're all a part of, which is a product of the Industrial Revolution. We don't have enough time for me to go into all of that, but I've written about it in my next book. Let me plug that in there so that next year. Society then shifted, where the gap between where you are legally and societally expected to be able to start a family and when you're physically ready to engage in sexual intimacy, the gap has separated. And so imagine now you're 14, 15, 16, and you're feeling all of these emotions, you're sexually attracted to the opposite sex, etc., but there's no way for you to healthily explore that or express that because you can't graduate from school until you're 18, or you can't graduate from university until you're 22, and by the time you graduate and start working, you're not even ready financially to get married until you're in your late 20s, early 30s. Are we supposed to believe that from the age of 13, let's say 13 to be generous, but some of us, even it was 10, 11, 12, you haven't engaged in any type of sexual activity until the age of 30, for most people, it's impossible. And then now, what does this society, and I'll highlight the capitalist society that doesn't care about your soul, doesn't care about your psychology, doesn't care about your well-being, but cares about how they're going to extract money from you, what do they start to introduce? And this becomes more popular in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, pornography. And as we know, I mean, I won't go into like all of the details and the effects of how damaging pornography is on the psychology and on, you know, your sexual intimacy and how you even approach the idea of sex and what you expect from sex and what you give when you're engaging in the sexual act. But imagine from the age of 12, 13, 14, you're exposed to pornography and it's presenting the sexual act and sexual intimacy in a particular way, and oftentimes an extremely unrealistic way. And your sexual preferences and your sexual tendencies are molded by that. Not only that, but as well your tolerance is heightened and heightened, or is it lowered and lowered? I don't know. Your tolerance is lower. Low tolerance, yeah. Your tolerance, I don't know, but you understand what I'm trying to say. In terms of, for example, and I'll give you another example. In the time of our grandfathers, so I'll give the example of maybe my grandfather specifically. My grandfather, on my father's side, and this will be a surprise to many people, he comes from a village called Biaya Uruan in Akwa Ibom. He hardly ever left his village until the age of maybe, he was in his late 20s. He traveled to Uyo, which is the capital, and he worked there until he retired, and then he went back to the village and he passed away, and he's buried in the house where his father and his grandfather are buried. Imagine how many beautiful women he would have encountered in his lifetime. In the village, every woman in the village, he knows them. So for 30 years, he's seen the same women, the same 100 women or 200 women up until the age of 30. And we don't know what percentage of them were attractive, what percentage of them weren't. Maybe in the capital, you're more exposed. But I can guarantee that me, by the age of 30, just through television, social media, TikTok, Instagram, I've seen more women in maybe 1 year than he saw in his entire lifetime. So that's gonna change my psychology and my tendencies and how I think about and how I interact with the opposite sex. Then when you take this now to what you find attractive and what your threshold is for what you find that will arouse you, and if you look at like the algorithms and you study them, if you're on Instagram or you're on TikTok, and we'll just be real, if you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram, you see a pretty girl, you like the picture, or the algorithm notices that you linger longer around this type of picture or the girl that looks a particular type of way, by the time you close your phone and reopen it, in your explore page, you'll see 10 of those same kind of girls. Or you scroll TikTok, you'll be swiping, you'll be seeing, and they're getting prettier and prettier and more attractive and more attractive. And you're seeing them and your mind is telling you, yes, this is what you like. Then you put your phone down and you look around and you don't see anyone that looks like these girls that you were looking at on your phone. Or when you get married, judging by the status of your pocket or what you're able to achieve, you look to put your phone down, you look at your wife, and then you look at the phone and you look at your wife, and you'll be one. And so when it's time to be intimate with your wife, why won't you have erectile dysfunction? Because what you're attracted to and what your psychology has been training you to find attractive is different from what you can get in real life. And so then that disparity affects the quality of your intimacy. Let alone if you're engaging in pornography and you're masturbating to pornography and you're training your body to react sexually to a particular type of image or a particular type of, we'll go into more detail later. All of these things, imagine if you're doing them from the age of 13 till by the time you get married at the age of 30, why won't your sex life suffer? And then 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of engaging in a particular type of behavior, you can't undo that within the first year of your marriage, or the second year of your marriage, or the third year of your marriage. And it's a struggle that many people have when they get married, and it affects the quality of their intimacy, and then that also affects their partner's quality of how they can extract pleasure from their partner. So all of this is a type of infidelity, because as we mentioned, zina is not just you engaging in sexual relations with somebody that you're not married to physically, but even mentally and even visually. These are all different types of zina. And Allah doesn't even tell us that zina is haram. He doesn't even tell us that zina is forbidden. He doesn't even command us to stay away from zina. He says, do not even approach it. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا zina. Do not approach zina. Because it's a fahsha, an evil deed, وَسَاءَ sabila, and it's a very, very destructive path. So all of these things are things that the whole concept of lowering the gaze, etc., it is all ingrained in the ideology of trying to maintain the quality of our intimacy and the quality of our marriages through us avoiding that. But it's virtually impossible in this day and age. If you have a cell phone, you have internet, you have certain applications, you're going, even if you just switch on the TV, you're going to see things that you're not supposed to see. And in earlier generations, again, to talk about the generational disparity, if you enter your house and you don't switch on your TV, you're not going to see anything that you're not supposed to see. But now, you don't even have to leave your bedroom. You don't even have to, as soon as you wake up, you can be engaging in haram without even you getting out of the bed. And this is an attack that is happening to us by the way society is functioning and what they want to do to us. Because the society that we live in, the capitalist society, it's more profitable for people to break down the traditional family. That's why we see individualism being promoted over collectivism. We see nuclear families being promoted over extended families. And even all of these extended families, etc., have their issues, but they were healthier and much more holistic than the alternative that we've been given today. So I'm seeing the indication that I've been speaking for too long. But my contribution that I wanted to make was that a lot of the laws that we have in place in the Sharia, when it comes to protecting us from zina, when it comes to protecting us and lowering our gaze, etc., there's a purpose behind that, and it's a bigger purpose than, oh, Allah just doesn't want us to enjoy ourselves, Allah doesn't just want us to indulge in our passions, but it's breaking down the family, which is the cornerstone of civilization and the cornerstone of our communities. And these are things that, you know, the society, the secular capitalist society have brought to us to psychologically break us down and damage us, and they're not healthy for us. So it's not even just about denying ourselves certain pleasures, but it's about maintaining our health psychologically, our mental health and our sexual health as human beings, and even our function in society. And I mentioned again earlier, as men specifically, before you could even achieve an orgasm, there was so much effort that you had to exert, and you had to become a particular type of person before you were allowed access to the privilege of that pleasure. Meaning, you had to work to be physically fit, you had to work to be financially stable, you had to work to be responsible, to maintain a partner that would be willing to engage sexually with you. But if you're able to bypass that by turning on your phone and achieving orgasm in 5 minutes without having to do anything, that affects your work ethic, that affects your ambition, that affects your drive, that affects everything about the characteristics that you're supposed to have that make you a man. So it's a long discussion that I don't think we'll have time to cover 100% today, but I just wanted to throw that contribution out so that I have an excuse to listen to the rest of the speakers for the rest of the panel.
I think that was really, really valuable to understand how what you call a moral form of zina, not a legal form of zina. All those things that move to zina actually rewire you and make it difficult for you to actually enjoy the halal one. Are we together? Yeah. That this one, that we're not talking of zina, we're talking of qurbila zina. All these things that are leading to zina, yes, zina itself. All these things are all, it's pleasurable, but at the cost of the pleasure of the one that is halal and the one that has far more important ramifications on your marriage and your life, etc. We do have the sex guru who has been quite quiet. So I'll give Brother Habib the opportunity. Firstly, we will look at just dysfunctions from what you have seen so far. What quick points would you share for men who are struggling quietly because of the nature of the embarrassment of bringing these things up? They show you're really not as manly as you are or could be. What would you share?
Is it on? The light has to be on the side.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. I need this part to be a bit more lively because I want to start talking about some interesting subjects and hopefully something that will excite people. So we've heard about the problems, but I also want to talk about some of the solutions, and I'll answer Sheikh Nuruddin's question. But before I get into what I want to get into, I'm very glad and pleased about especially what Sheikh Saeed said, because like the elephant in the room, shall we call it, like this idea that women do not have no needs, or women are Muslim wives, once they're married to us, once we provide them for them financially, there's no chance I was going to say no chance in hell, but it's maybe not the correct word, but there's no chance that they will ever step out, whether physically or emotionally. And the reality is, especially if you are speaking to anyone who does any form of counseling, anyone who's like an imam, a sex therapist and what have you, know the reality. And unfortunately, a lot of women do step out of their marriages the same way a number of men step out of their marriages, both physically and emotionally. Now, again, this is a reality, and this isn't anything new. A lot of the issues that we're finding, similar to what Sheikh Nuruddin mentioned, the things that happen now has happened in the past, maybe in a different form. And something that I was kind of quite inspired by when I went to study in Egypt was when I came across this book. Well, this is one of books by a scholar called Jalal ad-Din as-Suyuti. I'm sure you recognize who this is, or who that great scholar was from Egypt. He was from the 15th century, and he spoke about the importance of women's sexual satisfaction, referencing the Quran, referencing Hadith, referencing many scholars of the past. And many of the scholars of the past, they placed more emphasis on men to ensure that their wives were sexually satisfied to protect their chastity. So when we talk about the responsibility of marriage, like I was saying about oftentimes as men, we place more priority on the financial aspect. Many of the scholars of the past, such as As-Suyuti, such as Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, his student Abdul Qadir, Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, As-Suyuti, student Ash-Shadili. And I'm saying all of these names because this is nothing new. This is nothing new. So this idea that it's only happened in the last maybe 20, 30 years, or because of Western society, maybe it's amplified it, but in reality this has always existed. But what you found is many times you had Muslim scholars who tried to address this issue, of course teaching people about the importance of taqwa, but also teaching men the responsibility that they have to ensure that their wives are chaste. So this is one of the main responsibilities that a lot of the scholars placed on the men. And again, when I'm speaking about chastity, I'm not only speaking about the physical, I'm not only speaking about the private parts, but I'm also speaking about emotional chastity, which Sheikh Mustafa was alluding to. So that being said, I also, obviously being a man, I think there is a lot of misinformation and a lot of miseducation that men we suffer from. Whether one is married, unmarried, has had relations before or not, similar to what Sheikh Mustafa said, a lot of us have been, I would say, miseducated by porn, by Hollywood, by Nollywood, and also by our friends who often exaggerate in terms of their experiences. A lot of people have intimacy issues. It's nothing new. A lot of people have intimacy issues, whether it's erectile dysfunction. Again, this is nothing new. Was something that many of the scholars spoke about in the past. This was something that even some of the women companions complained to the Prophet, peace be upon him, that their husband was suffering from anin, which is like erectile dysfunction. And even in one particular instance, there was a woman who complained to Umar bin Khattab when he was a caliph, and she complained that her husband wasn't able to fulfill. Okay, Umar gave her time. Can you give him at least a year to see if he can resolve this issue? Unfortunately, the man wasn't able to resolve the issue within a year, and they subsequently annulled the marriage. But my point is, based on this particular story and similar stories, this is why you find many of the Muslim scholars, they had no issue with men, obviously and women as well, but seeking advice or seeking help in terms of to try and fix whether it's erectile dysfunction or any anxiety or any issues that men have in the bedroom, or women likewise. In terms of nowadays, the common issues that I come across and a number of sex therapists and sex educators, particularly pertaining to men, is one around erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation. But with premature ejaculation, so people can understand, actually, let me before I go on, does everyone know what premature ejaculation is? Okay, that was a strong yes. Wait. And this is something, because oftentimes premature ejaculation, that's essentially when you ejaculate too quickly. When you ejaculate too quickly, but this is subjective. Some people say if you ejaculate within 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, but it's all subjective. Now, the reason why I say it's subjective, because if you climax, or ejaculate, shall I say, because there is a difference between ejaculation and orgasm. You can have an ejaculation without having an orgasm, but that's a separate conversation altogether. My point is that if you ejaculate within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and your wife is like, we've just started and you finished, it's a problem. If that's a problem, if you think it's a problem, and it's also causing maybe resentment and intimacy issues, then maybe some doctors might consider that you have premature ejaculation, especially if it persists for maybe like 6 months, at least 6 months. Whereas if you climax fairly quickly, or ejaculate, fairly quickly, and your wife is okay with that, and you're okay with that, that's not premature ejaculation. So it's an issue within the mind. There are some men who self-diagnose themselves and say, I have premature ejaculation, I climax too quickly. Why? Because their expectation, similar to what Sheikh Mustafa said, is their expectation, because particularly because of watching porn, they think they should last 45 minutes in the bedroom. So they last 10 minutes and they think, I've got a problem. And also their wife might think he's got a problem because she might need longer to climax, or she doesn't climax. And also because on her part, she doesn't realize that, and a lot of women don't realize that most women do not orgasm by penetration alone. So you can be going ham for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Most women are not going to orgasm that way. But because you finish, for example, within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, she might think, okay, you've got a problem. You finished too quickly. She'll go to her friends, her girlfriends, and they'll say the same thing. They'll be laughing at Kiki. And I always tell the women as well, just for you to understand from the male's perspective, when you are with your husband, you go on top and see if you can last for 4 minutes. No, it's true. No, it's true. A lot of women, I'm not speaking from personal experience, but a lot of women give it 45 seconds. They want to change position. Okay, that's enough. You do the work. So women also need to understand that for men, I think most men want to satisfy our wives. But because the sexual script that we have learned or that we've adopted is that sex is just about penetration. Sex is just about how long we can last in the bedroom, when there's more to it than that. And that's where Sheikh Saeed was speaking about the importance of emotional intimacy, because that's what a lot of women need. A lot of women need the actual act of intercourse itself. If you give her enough emotional intimacy and you know her love languages, and you're making her flutter down below, and she's lubricating and she's wet, even if you last 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and she climaxes beforehand, she will be like, mashallah, you lasted an hour. And then you look at your stopwatch, it's like, I know I lasted 2 minutes. So again, it's a mindset. And and I work with non-Muslims as well. This isn't just an issue in Africa or just an issue with Muslims. This is an issue also amongst non-Muslims who are even very promiscuous. There are a lot of women who have maybe even had multiple sexual partners, but they've never enjoyed sex. And people might find that very hard to believe, or they've never had an orgasm, or a lot of like porn stars, it's because it's an act. So even when you watch porn, but if someone did watch porn hypothetically, and you're seeing all of these gushing coming out, a lot of that there's induced water. It's not them actually ejaculating. So again, if you've been watching porn, or you've been again miseducated, this is what you're seeing, naturally you're trying to recreate that. So when you're going with your wife and then you're not seeing all of these waterworks, you think something is wrong with her, or something is wrong with your technique or your style, and all it is just a case of miseducation, and even understanding male sexuality is very different from female sexuality. So there is something which a number of sex therapists, they talk about how men, we're quite goal-orientated, whereas women, they're quite pleasure-orientated. And essentially, as men, can I ask, if you were to have intercourse, intimate relations, and you didn't climax, would you consider that to be a an enjoyable session? No, that's the case for a lot of men because we want to see the finishing line. Whereas with women, that's not the case. They can have an extremely pleasurable sexual experience without having an orgasm. So orgasm isn't the goal. So that's why a lot of the work I do is focusing on pleasure, female pleasure in particular, because that can manifest itself in different ways, especially for a woman. It can manifest itself by way of an orgasm. It can manifest itself by way of ejaculation or squirting, and it can also manifest itself in the way of a woman feeling pleased with herself and with you. So that's why it's important, like what Sheikh Saeed was referring to about the love languages, knowing what turns her on, knowing how you can communicate with her, and also understanding the different types of intimacy. Does everyone know about the different types of intimacy? Because I think as a men, we know about physical intimacy. Everyone's nodding. Even if you're not nodding, I can see your eyes is nodding. We know about physical intimacy, whereas emotional intimacy, which is what a lot of women crave. A lot of women crave that. And I think a number of men, myself included, unfortunately, we have more of that relationship, that bond with our male friends. So it's not that we lack emotional intimacy. It's not that we don't know how to be vulnerable with someone. It's just that, unfortunately, many of us find it very, very difficult to be vulnerable with our wife. And that's something that I think a lot of women are craving for. And that's something that we should try and aspire to be someone that we can be like their friend, be like their partner, not be like a husband, which Sheikh Nuruddin was referring to earlier, of the generation of the past. Well, if that's the relationship you want, fine, but I don't think a lot of women like that, where they're just referring to you as sir. You know, they want more of a relationship which is complementary. So it's not just about you having sex with her, it's about you both enjoying the act. So I just want to talk about a lot of the miseducation before we go into kunyaza, because I think a number of people are misinformed. And if you are struggling, like I said, whether it's in the form of erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, whether it's in the form of sexless marriages, because again, that's very common. Some statistics say like 1 in 3 marriages are sexless. Whether it's in the form of desire discrepancy, as in you want intimacy much more than she does, rather than looking at it as in my wife has an issue, she has a problem. No, there is something that you need to resolve together, or try and see what the underlying issues there are. So one of the things that I find quite difficult is, especially amongst religious Muslims, is if their wife is not responding to the husband straight away, a lot of people will refer to the hadith and start using that and weaponize that against the woman. That is not going to make the woman receptive. That is not going to make the woman receptive. And if you read a lot of the classical books of eretology, a lot of the classical sex manuals, they very rarely they use that hadith. Because if you want to educate men and teach men to be good and competent lovers, you cannot teach them, or you cannot tell them to, use these hadiths saying Allah's going to curse you if you don't respond to my call. The angel's going to, and again, it's a mentality, because some men, do you want to sleep with a woman who's petrified of you? Or do you want to sleep with a woman who's enjoying the act the same way you should be enjoying the act? And something that, just thinking about what Sheikh Saeed said earlier, and again, this is why I'm saying this is nothing new in terms of zina, when we're talking about it. There's a hadith in which the Prophet, peace be upon him, is reported to have said that the people of the past, like referring to the children of Israel, the reason why the women started committing zina was because the men were neglectful. They stopped taking care of themselves. They stopped beautifying themselves. And that's why the women stepped out. And if you look at the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, and you read the classical tafsir, many of the scholars they speak about is that the reason why the wife of Aziz, she's known as Zulaykha in the tradition, the reason why she was enticed by Yusuf, not only because he was very attractive and very beautiful, was because her husband was neglectful of her. So their mindset, especially like I said, the pre-modern scholars, a lot of them, they actually thought that women have very intense desire, sexual desire, even more than men. That's why they place more onus on the man to ensure that your wife is chaste. Whereas nowadays, with many contemporary scholars, it's the opposite, that men naturally have higher desire, want sex more, and women are just happy just if we were to give them some money. So this is something that I was quite intrigued by, and I was thinking that, okay, how can we as men be better husbands? Is being better husbands both in the bedroom and out of the bedroom. So that's just, again, a lot of it is miseducation and misinformation, and then we need to educate ourselves properly in terms of correct sex education.
Jazakallahu khairan. So how you perform out of the bedroom affects what happens in the bedroom. How you perform 4 days earlier affect how you perform in the bedroom when the time comes. So if you look at it as, for those who drive cars, if gear 5 is the actual sexual act, gear 1 may be just helping her in the kitchen. Gear 2 may just be a 20-second kiss 2 days ago. Gear 3, gear 4. The biggest mistake you can make is just because you have your head on gear 1, you try to start the engine and move into gear 4 or 5, and you are wondering why it doesn't move, in particular. So along this line, I would like to discuss more on gear 5, 4 and 5. In the culture we heard yesterday of Rwanda, and in a few other cultures, there's been concerted effort to teach men about the importance of women finding pleasure when it comes to sexual relations. So much so that in places like Rwanda, Uganda, and a few of these areas, it's just expected as part of the urf. It's one of those good aspects of their urf and custom. I would like Sheikh Habib to share with us, we have just a few more minutes to go, but to share with us what exactly, in technical terms, is the Kunyaza approach. So not just the philosophy behind it, but what exactly is it? With the hope that what you say would make us more curious to go and watch online, where Brother Habib has discussions and he has one little pillow, one little massaging thing. Did he bring it? Oh, alas. No, but yeah, so. Yeah. Oh, I saw it online. I didn't know we will have practical demonstration. Yeah, so again, what I hope this does is it makes it difficult for us to forget. Yeah. No, Bismillah.
Bismillah. Bismillah. Yeah, I was waiting for you to I was going to lead into it and then bring it out. But okay, so obviously, Kunyaza essentially, and I'll give a quick demonstration in terms of what the technique involves, but assuming that we've done the necessary emotional work and a prelude in terms of that your wife is ready for intimacy, she's ready for Kunyaza, so she's in a relaxed state of mind, you've done the foreplay, the emotional foreplay that we spoke about, the mental stimulation, and she's physically ready for Kunyaza, so like the 4th and 5th stage. And also just something that I want to kind of mention actually before we talk about Kunyaza, has anyone heard of arousal non-concordance? Arousal non-concordance? Okay, men and women do have this. Okay, so arousal non-concordance is when there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. So the mind and the body, meaning that there's a disconnect between the response of your physical response, like your genitals, and your mind. And this is something that both men and women have, and it's important that people understand this, because if a woman is wet down below, it doesn't necessarily mean that she wants intimacy. And it's important that people understand this. And I'll give this example for men. As men, we have this arousal non-concordance where sometimes when you wake up, you might wake up with what we call morning wood, with an erection, right? It doesn't mean that you want intimacy. It's just a natural physical reaction. Likewise, sometimes women self-lubricate without any reason whatsoever. It doesn't mean that they want intimacy. So it's important that men, especially when you're engaging in intimacy, even if you're touching her down below, and even if you see signs that she's wet, because some men think straight away, that's a green light, let me go in, and that's not the case. And sometimes women who do not understand their bodies and don't understand arousal non-concordance, how it works, they think that their body is betraying them. And it also happens to women during sexual abuse and things like that. So it's important that when we're talking about consent, when we're talking about what women want, first and foremost, you go by actually by what they say, as opposed to signs in their body, whether it's their nipples are becoming hard or they're becoming wet. So I'm just wanting to say that because a lot of kunyaza revolves around, and I'll kind of demonstrate, but using your manhood to simulate the woman's anatomy. But before you go into advanced kunyaza with the penetration, you need to make sure that she gives her consent or she's happy for you to enter, not just because you see signs because she's getting wet or her labia is protruding. So that's just wanted to kind of, even though you can read up about it, it's called arousal non-concordance. But getting to kunyaza at hand. So assuming that your wife is ready for intimacy, she's mentally prepared, you've engaged in a couple of kissing and small sweet words and things like that, you've sent them sweet messengers and things like that. So now we go into the kunyaza technique. Essentially what it involves, and I'll tell you the story of how, this is legend. I'm not sure if this is actually true story, but this is how kunyaza is taught. That is about hundreds of years ago, there was a queen from Rwanda, and her husband was away on a military expedition. So she was by herself and she was yearning for some special attention, shall we say. So she summoned one of her guards. Again, this is why it's important that we fulfill our wives' desires. She called one of her guards to make love to her. So the guard, he was walking towards her, but he was trembling. And he was like, what do you want? And she said, I want you to make love to me. I need you to satisfy my desires. And obviously he was worried because he was thinking, especially if the king comes back, he's going to execute me. So she said, if you don't make love to me, I'm going to get you killed. So as he was walking towards her and he had his manhood in his hand, he started to tremble like this. He started to shake. And as he was shaking and he was walking towards her, he started to hit his penis, his manhood, against her clitoris. And from there, it said that a large gush of water expelled from her loins, and then a large river called Lake Kivu was created in Eastern Central Africa. And then when the queen was fulfilled and satisfied, she told the guard to go away. Then she called her, when the king came back, she told the king, this is how I want you to make love to me. It's not just about penetration. I want you to do this tapping, rubbing technique, which is known as kunyaza. That's the story. That's how it's told. Obviously, it's not true, but that's just how they kind of told the story. But essentially, what it's about is it's prioritizing women's sexual pleasure, how it's taught, and also focusing on the clitoris. So even when we speak about the clitoris, or what I refer to as the K-spot, most people, when they think about the clitoris, they think about just the external. I'm sure you can see this. Hello? Can you see? So when we talk about the and actually also for any woman that has been circumcised, because unfortunately we know it's quite prevalent in parts of Nigeria, a woman who has been circumcised can still experience kunyaza and can still experience an orgasm. But for those women who haven't been circumcised, in terms of their external clitoris has been removed, this is the external clitoris here. Okay? But what a lot of men do not realize, also a lot of women themselves, is the clitoris itself extends far deep behind the labia minora. So the actual clitoris, the structure is this. Look at this bad boy. So this is the clitoris, right? So look how big it is. And it's actually similar to like the penis in size. Obviously it's much bigger, the actual clitoris, just in case you're thinking mine is bigger than this. But so this is the clitoris. This is, can you stand up so you can demonstrate together? Can you hold the props? Can you stand up? Can you hold this? So I can talk. Please, just so you can hold. So I can talk. Because I'm using the mic, so. So this is the external clitoris here. Now the clitoris, obviously, it extends and it sits. So obviously you can imagine this is the vulva, you've got the lips, and you've got the big lips here. Most of the clitoris sits behind a woman's lips. So even if you are stimulating, you're pressing, just keep that one for yourself. Even if you're stimulating and you're pressing against the lips, you're also stimulating the internal clitoris. So when we're talking about kunyaza involves the stimulation of the clitoris, it's not just the external clitoris. Can you actually maybe just hold the mic and I can talk? Because this is...
Do you want to hold this?
No, you can hold the mic.
Alright, cool. I got the mic as well.
Yeah, okay. So I can talk. So I can't just, okay, right. So kunyaza itself, when we're talking about the stimulation, imagine this is your pecker. Now you do like this, the tapping like this. Essentially you start at the clitoris, but not too hard and and then you go down. Up and down, left and right. you can do diagonal, you can write your name. This is simple kunyaza. Now again, the whole idea, and this is the reason why it's good for men as well, is teaching you ejaculatory control. Because as men, how long does the average man last in the bedroom? Any guesses? 50. 50, mashallah. 5.4 minutes. The average man lasts 5.4 minutes in terms of intercourse. So the reason why kunyaza is good is because it's teaching a man. Also, because especially the glands, which is the head, is the most sensitive part of the penis. When you get used to, like, it's a titillating feeling, but you're not going to tap too much, so you will release quickly. So, and again, if you find that you are getting to the point of no control, the point of no return, meaning you're getting to the point you're going to climax, then you use maybe other parts of your manhood to stimulate, because this way you're enticing the woman, because generally average woman needs about 20 minutes of stimulation, some women it's 5-10 minutes in order to experience an orgasm. If you're doing kunyaza properly, you do this for like 5 to 10 minutes, this is like, again, the simple kunyaza without penetration, then she's going to get to the point where she'll be begging you, come on, put it inside me, you're doing this too long. Now let her either climax, or just before she's climaxed, then you can do the advanced kunyaza, which is a combination of penetration and the tapping. So that's essentially what kunyaza is. So again, like the technique itself is not actually revolutionary, because even one of the books I read by As-Suyuti, he referred to this technique, where he referred to the man using his member to stimulate al-badr, which is the clitoris. And another scholar, Al-Jahid, he also said something similar. And there was one scholar, Ibn al-Jawzi, he mentioned that the women of his time, because the men were not satisfying their wives, you had a number of women who were having relations with other women, and they were rubbing against themselves, a practice known as sihaq or sahaq. So, and then he said, a wise man will know how to use his member to stimulate the part of where a woman is circumcised. Essentially talking about like the kunyaza technique. So for me, the technique itself isn't anything like revolutionary, but it's one that prioritizes women's pleasure. It's one that concentrates on the K-spot or the clitoris, whether the external clitoris or the internal clitoris, and it teaches men sexual discipline and to learn ejaculatory control. So, and again, then you can then do the intercourse, and then you can climax together. So that, inshallah, that's how you can have mind-blowing sex, inshallah.
Jazakumullahu khairan. A few points I want to just rush through before we end. Sometimes the wife feels pain, whatever you try to do, the need to show compassion, because that is when you need your greatest self-restraint. Some positions are not as comfortable as others, but it needs this openness of communication. It's important to remember part of the benefit of the kunyaza, but also of foreplay. The more time you spend in foreplay, the longer you can last when you penetrate. The longer you spend in foreplay, the longer you can last when it comes to penetration. For most women, Brother Habib mentioned how men are very goal-oriented and women are pleasure-oriented. What most women want to see in the foreplay is that they are of more interest to you than the vagina. That in everything you are doing, you kiss the finger, kiss here, kiss there, etc., as if you are not interested in that. Yeah. That you really are in love with me and you are showing me that affection. Not just you're trying to quickly get to your spot. Exercise is important. Exercise is important. Even if it is just walking for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, if you can do more, fine. But your own physical health, not talking about stamina, running, jogging, no. Just your own physical health affects how long you can last. Because of the embarrassment sometimes and the gap understand also that not every sexual relation is going to be mind-blowing. This one was not as good as the last one. The last one was better than this other one. This other one was, so you will have your ups and downs as you experiment, and it goes with moods, it goes with many things. But please remember to love climax for the other before you love it for yourself. Brother mentioned, for most women, in one study over 70%, climax and their own form of ejaculation doesn't happen through penetration in over 70% of cases. So it's not you want to go harder, you want to last longer. It's finding out what works for the other person. Your wife may be one where penetration is really not what gives her pleasure and is just okay to satisfy you. So the need for that open communication. Another way of saying what we said earlier is that for most women, the journey is more important than the destination. The journey is the pleasure. That final destination is really more for you. Sometimes you say, I don't feel like it. Yeah, I know she's interested, but maybe both of us have not done it for a while, and who should go first? Just the sexual act raises the amount of hormones such as vasopressin and oxytocin that changes your mood to be more loving. In other words, I didn't feel like it, but you know what? Yeah, I know she would want it. You give it to her, you raise your own hormones, and before you know it, you are back into it. In other words, sometimes it's rewiring your own chemistry. For those of us who are too busy, you come back home just from work, no time for foreplay. You really need to be careful how much you allow work to make the sexual act and the necessary foreplay difficult. Please, man la yashkuru nasko, whoever does not show appreciation to others has not shown appreciation to Allah. Do not enjoy sex and you didn't say thank you. Give feedback. Why? Because in her head, did I perform well or not? Was he happy? Was he satisfied? It's embarrassing to ask. But how do you feel when she says, thank you so much? It raises your own sense of self-esteem. And the same thing the other way around. Whatever, and this is something Brother Habib has said, and I'm just saying it in another way, and I think Brother Mustafa alluded to it. What is important to her may not be something you're very interested in. However, the equation is, whatever is important to her should be as important to you as she is to you. If she is important to you and something is important to her, but you don't see the value in it, give the value of that thing, the value of her to you. And lastly, we try never to instrumentalize sex or weaponize it as part of negotiation. You only make situations worse. The same thing with the side of the wife. No, until you get me this thing before I agree, you will mess things up bad time. The same thing the other way around. This abstinence is usually taken in the case of nushuz. Nushuz is where the wife has done something so bad that it is breaking part of the marriage contract. And part of the steps towards divorce is letting her understand it has gotten that serious that you are not interested in sharing the bed with her. It has to be serious. It can't be just used because you didn't allow me, you don't play with that area. I would stop there unless there's one burning. No. All right. So Saeed will give us his one and we will close with a dua. After that, we'll talk about after that.
I wanted to go back to the issue again of foreplay. And you talked about gear 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in my relationship with my wife, I communicate with Mariam on average 5 times a day. On average, 5 times a day. Starting the day, how are you doing around 9 a.m.? I check again around noon. I check again around 1 or 2, how are you doing? By 4 again, I check. And if she's running late, around 5 p.m., I say, how is the day going? I hope everything's going well. Constantly, I'm in touch. And when we talk about communication and foreplay and so on, like many of the speakers have said, talking, contacting, asking, checking up, and so on, all of that is foreplay. And this is daily. The only time I wasn't able to do this was in the last week because of how busy we were preparing for this summit. But on average, 5 times a day. Just text message, man, sometimes, we throw a call and so on and so forth. I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
The Prophet ﷺ said the deeds most loved by Allah are those done regularly, even if they are small. Yeah. And so they would actually say, just as in management, so also in marriage. The big things are usually the little things done frequently. I'd like to thank our panel for their deep insights, the shyness around the topic, but also the reality. It's not easy to talk on these topics, so I would like to thank them for their courage. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wa barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we are already now having lunch. There's a team that would give us some little... Yeah, have a seat, please. According to the timetable, we were supposed to, somewhere before this ends, answer any really burning questions. And just to respect that, we will not interrupt feeding. But time is not on our side. We're supposed to wrap this up by 2. I will take 2 or 3 questions if anything is really burning. If it's not burning and you think by going online you will get more from the speakers on this, then we will leave it. But anything burning for anybody. 1, 2, 3. One. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask this question. It's going to be long-winded, so please forgive me. I want to start by appreciating the people who put this conference together to break down a lot of barriers that all of us have. Excuse me. Can you hear me better? Okay. I want to start by thanking the people who organized this conference to help us break down personal barriers that each of us have in being functional members of our society. In saying that, I'll pick one particular example and thank Alhaji Saeed Takuma for his really, really personal exploration in such a public setting yesterday. And the fact that it took him 31 years to get to that place shows us the battles each of us are going through in a society that Allah created us in and is part of our tests. That leads me to my question. Before that, sorry, I want to qualify one more thing. Allah has said that if we were to become perfect and stop making mistakes, that He would take us out and replace us. Because we were sent here to be tested and to worship Allah and to be tested. So we are here to be tested. The angels are perfect, and that's why they wondered, why would Allah create another creation that would do fasada and fitna on the earth? That was their understanding. You already have perfect worshippers. Allah, part of the wisdom when Allah said He knows that which the angels do not know, is that we will be coming back to Him. So it's okay to err. It's okay to have the backgrounds we all have, the traumas we all have. Thank you for your patience as I qualify that. Sheikh Nuru, Love Doctor, Habib, Mustafa, Alhaji Saad. The question is, how do we practically, in this context of age, society, basement, where we fear judgment, shame, our past, the molestations we face, the abuse from caregivers, how do we take that personal first step in this context to begin to work on ourselves? There's a lot of steps before we get to Kunyaza. I'm sorry, this is the truth. It took you 31 years. How do we reduce that time for the brothers? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Jazakallahu khairan. Okay, number 2, here, behind you.
Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time since yesterday. Actually, I'm from Lagos. That's how amazing it is. And I can say that I cannot thank our speakers enough. Starting with the first speaker, like for me, I've had experience from one woman to another, probably because I had I've been through divorce at a point, and so I can say I've seen 2 experiences, and what that tells me is that from my previous experience, I used to think that women don't get to orgasm. I never imagined it. For 6 years, I was married to my first wife, so I never imagined that. We had issues probably because of child and something happened. So with my new experience, I realized, in fact, the first time I experienced orgasm, it was like something had happened already. I was really scared, really. But then I had to read a couple of things and I realized, okay, fine. Okay, it's normal, it's good. Okay, it's a good thing, actually. So the question now is, you said that, I just want to know what you mean when you said the difference between orgasm and ejaculation. Because I'm still surprised you said it's a different thing. So I just want you to elaborate more on that. Now, the second thing is that when, especially for we that are young, in marriage, our wives can be, especially when we start having kids, one of the major challenge that some of us think we have is a lot of responsibilities on our wives, really. Sometimes, in fact, we go as far as getting maid and all of that, but that's still not enough. Maybe because of their attention to kids. So you find out that most of the time, as a man, you just let go, even when you really want to, have intercourse with your wife. You just let go because you feel she's too busy. She's been busy since you got home, attending and all of that, until you have to go to bed almost every time like that. So I want to ask Sheikh Mustafa. The first one is for Dr. Akonde. The second one is for Sheikh Mustafa. Do you think that's enough reason for a man to start considering a second wife? Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for the summit, and we've really enjoyed and gained insight into marriage. For us that are young, I have a couple of questions. So the first one is, nowadays we have women that I would like to believe actresses, because they pretend for so long that you don't know whether they're in love with you or they're not. So, and for us young people, we would like to marry in love. So the problem is, how do you detect whether she's an actress and she's acting for the sake of getting married, because there's pressure from her house and there's pressure maybe from her family members to get married. So how do you detect from early whether she has good characters? And the second question is...
So basically, how do you know, I hope our gentlemen are listening, whether you are dealing with somebody who actually has good character or whether this is all acting?
Yes.
All right.
That's the question. And the second question is, what are the key top 5 qualities to look for in a woman when married? Because it is very important to have patience. But also, if you're not living with her, how will you know her real character? And also in North, we have this culture of bincike. And the main problem with bincike is people like to hide the true identity or the true maybe character of maybe the person that they're doing bincike for. For example, as a guy, if you go trying to do bincike about a female, her family members will try and hide the fact that maybe her a bad character or anything, so that you don't end up saying, okay, I'm not going to marry her. So that's the second question. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So if you can bring the mic just to this last question here. So this earlier question, how do you get to know somebody if the family is trying to hide the truth?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yes. So this is for you, Sheikh Nordin.
Hey.
Yes.
Okay. Oh.
You were saying something earlier about marrying someone, basically on your level. When you say if you're smart, someone who's like you, basically, to marry your type. And yesterday, I don't know which of the speakers was talking about, our backgrounds basically reflect on us. So some people are, for example, maybe a guy is from a home where his mom cooks. And now, as Sheikh Mustafa rightly said, the world is different. Maybe, for example, if you live in the West, the woman doesn't like to cook. How do you navigate these life issues? Because sometimes people think, they're small issues and that they wouldn't cause a problem. But then later, years in the marriage, it starts causing resentment. So I just wanted to ask, how do you navigate, I'm not married, by the way, so.
All right. Does anybody want to start? All right.
No.
We don't have to answer the questions in order, do we? Okay. My response was to the brother in the back that was asking about how do you know if your wife is an actress or not? How do you know if you're going to marry the right person, etc.? And honestly, 2 things. Number 1, you'll never truly know somebody until you live with them. Regardless of how long you date, regardless of how long you investigate, and even when you live with them, it will take a couple of months, if not a couple of years, for you to even discover the true character of the person that you're living with. So I remember once, the 3 stages of any relationship, but more specifically a romantic relationship, is described as performing, storming, and then norming. Because when you first meet somebody, it's a performance. You put on your best face. You show them the best parts of yourself. When you meet somebody and you introduce yourself to them, for example, you're not going to tell them, oh, my name is so-and-so, but I have a pornography addiction and sometimes, occasionally, I like to do this. No, you put on your best characteristics. You show them how kind you are, how funny you are, how etc., etc., etc. And the beginning stage of your interaction, you're putting on this show. So it's not necessarily that you're acting, but you're highlighting the better parts of yourself and you're concealing the less attractive parts of your character. Then when you move into the second stage now, storming, the storming is when your true character is revealed, their true character is revealed, and now you have to clash. There's a clash between the parts of your character that don't agree with parts of their character, and then the disappointment of the things that they thought you were about, that you weren't about, or the aspects of your character that you emphasized that you couldn't maintain. And then after that, if you're able to overcome that stage, then there's the norming stage where you now know yourselves, and then you're able to now create a life based on, or continue your relationship based on the newfound information that you have each other, for each other. So whilst I emphasize that you can't truly know somebody until you live with them, at the same time, you can't truly love somebody that you don't know. So I feel like, and maybe this is just my personal opinion, it's not, gospel truth, it's not something, but I don't believe you can truly love somebody properly or realistically in the early stages of a relationship or even before you marry them. And I say this to say that love is a choice. It's not a naturally occurring emotion. When I say love is a choice, it's not a naturally occurring emotion. There are things, there's a part of your relationship, for example, that would be affection. There'll be a part of your relationship that's infatuation. But love can only truly be realized when you've overcome the difficult stages of your relationship. You've overcome the challenges, you've overcome the character clashes, etc. But for a lot of us, because of how expensive it is to get married, because of how much pressure we put on marriage and maintaining marriages, people don't want to take the risk of entering into a relationship for fear that if they reach those challenges and the marriage doesn't survive, then they'll be seen as a failure, or they would have wasted all of the money and the time that they invested into making that marriage happen. But realistically, I feel like it's impossible. So it's one of those things where you have a good opinion of the person, you pray to Allah, you have a good indication, and you take the risk if you feel like this person is worth it. And you establish a relationship with that person in a way where it's not based on the love that you have, and it's not based on this, this concept of the romantic love per se, but it's based on the loyalty and the dedication and the common goal that you both have in trying to make the marriage work. Because when you're even married, you're not going to love your partner all the time. There'll be times when you despise your partner. There'll be times when you don't want to talk to your partner. There'll be times when you don't want to look at your partner. But you overcome that and you return to the times when you love them due to that common interest and that dedication and the common respect and appreciation that you have for each other. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not. And I'll give you a personal example from like specifically my marriage. I married my wife within 2 months of knowing her. And I married her like 2 days after I physically met her. But the reason why I was able and I felt confident enough to do that is because before we got married, we had a candid conversation. And she said, look, we don't really know each other. She's like, I like you and I feel like you will be a good husband. You like me and maybe you feel like I'll be a good wife. Let's make an agreement that we'll have a simple wedding. We're not going to spend that much money. We're not going to put too much pressure. He said, let's get married and do the nikah to make everything halal and get to know each other. And if within the first year of the marriage, we realize that this is not going to work, we can come to a conclusion that we'll separate and there's no hard feelings and everyone can go their separate ways. It's not marriage with the intention of divorce, but it was clarifying that there's no pressure and we're getting married with the intention of getting to know each other to see if we're compatible, because we realized we couldn't truly know each other mentally, emotionally, and specifically physically without having a nikah. You're never going to know someone you're not married to. You're never going to know someone you don't live with. So you have to get over that fear, and just if you feel like this person is a good enough investment and you have a good enough opinion of them. And another thing as well, one of my teachers told me with regards to marriage, in the beginning, you might even marry somebody that doesn't have a good intention towards you. And due to the love that you show them within the relationship and the things that you go through in the relationship, the love will come. He said, so for example, there are many men that marry women that don't love them. The woman is interested in them because of their money or their status or their family or for any reason. But by the time you marry her and you bring her to your house and you guys get to know each other and you go through all of these different experiences and you laugh and you cry and you travel and you do all of these things, within a year, 2 years, you guys are in love. And every year even, the relationship, you'll be more in love with your partner than you were before. There are many people who went like, when me and my wife got married, we didn't love each other. We didn't even know each other, to talk less of loving each other. But I can say that every year that I've been married to my wife, I love her more than the year previous. And maybe even the love in terms of the actual definition of love didn't even come into the marriage until maybe a year or two into the marriage. But I had a good opinion and we made the risk and we did the investment. You guys, most people here in Nigeria are businessmen. We have side hustles. Even if you're employed, you have a business. Business, nothing is guaranteed. You have an idea, you think it's a good idea, you make the investment and you go for it. You pray Allah makes it successful, and if He does, alhamdulillah, and if He doesn't, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun.
Jazakallahu khairan. Yeah, Brother Idris, and then Saeed, and then Habib.
You know, Assalamu alaikum. I'm a marriage counselor, amongst many things, and I was very, very concerned about the high rate of divorces. Young people, many of them fall in love, and within a short while they fall out of love. And so therefore, it prompted me and a friend of mine to write a book. It's called Premarital Conversations and Beyond. What kind of conversations you should have. And a fundamental thing is this, it's not only marrying the right person, it's about you also being the right person. We can theorize about marriage as much as we want. I remember some years ago, before I got married, I met 5 ladies at another country, and they were social workers. And I was talking about relationships as if I was an authority, and they got a shock of their life. They said, "Have you studied it?" I said, "No, I didn't study it." They said, "But you know so much." Yet the irony of it all, in my first week of marriage, I realized what I was speaking about is completely irrelevant. Really. So we often have a romantic notion of marriage purely, not the prosaic reality. And what I also do to couples who want to get married, I give them 100 questions they need to ask each other. You say 100? I said, yes. Now you may say, this 80 I can deal with, I can compromise, but these 20 are non-negotiable with me. Non-negotiable. It stems from your own value systems, right? And if you were to ask me, off my head, what will 5 qualities I would look for in a spouse? A critical thing I look for is the temperament of that individual. That's very, very important. Temperament of the individual. Is the person mild-tempered or has anger issues? I'll also ask them what are the expectations of marriage. And thirdly, I'll probably ask them about, of course, their own spirituality. What is the relationship with Allah, with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam? So these questions, 4 or 5, are very, very important questions. And in that book, Premarital Conversations, we make a distinction between love and infatuation. Often when young people say they're in love, they're not even in love, they're infatuated, right? Now it doesn't mean if you love someone, that love itself can sustain that marriage, right? So it's very, very important that you'll find, especially in the first 3 years of marriage, besides discovering who your partner is, you'll discover who you are. And that's important. And you know what? In a good relationship, your love grows all the time. So for me, that's very important. If someone were to ask, it reminds me very quickly, there was one couple, they were going to get married, they went to a fortune teller. So they asked the fortune teller, he says, Caroline and I are going to get married next week. What do you see in our marriage? He says, well, in the first 30 years of your marriage, you'll be unhappy. Then he asks, what happens after that? He said, well, then you get used to it. So, inshallah, I pray your first 30 years are happy, the second 30 years are even happier, right? So it's about you, it's about your own temperament. Are you prepared to help each other to grow, right? And the last part I want to make, of course, you read istikhara, you ask Allah for guidance, and that's very, very important. And if you marry someone that is generous, you are blessed. If a couple comes to me, say if they're getting married next week, give me some advice, I'll tell the man, make your wife the center of your life. Love her, be romantic, be affectionate. I'll tell the wife, respect your husband and also respect his family. You and I know, when you marry a woman that loves your family, takes good care of them, you'll do anything for them, right? I just thought I'll say those few. Jazakumullah.
Thank you. I'll go and then come back to you. I'll give my courtship and marriage to Maryam as an example. First and foremost, the hadith of Rasulullah said there are 4 reasons that a man should look at in selecting a bride. Her beauty, her wealth, the genealogy of her family, and her piety. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I'll rub the face of the man that chooses a bride not based on her piety. Malam Nuruddin Limu gave a statistic about the types of marriages that last the longest. In my and Miriam's case, it was an arranged marriage. She happened to be in school with one of my younger sisters, and they sent me a picture, a photograph, and asked if I would be interested. Now, this is where I'll delve a little bit into what Baba Ahmed said, or asked. Baba Ahmed, you listening? When the photograph came, that was when I started questioning my problems. And I had to make a decision. Would I be making the advance to express an interest in this woman, knowing I had these problems? So that was the initial questioning of my trauma. Then I wrote her a letter. That it's a long time ago. So I wrote her a letter introducing myself, who I am, and so on and so forth. And I was very specific about saying there's a difference between the name she knows and me. And I said, the name is the money. I am the poor relative. And I told Miriam, I am asking you, I'm giving you the right to walk away if your interest is in marrying somebody that has money, because I do not have money. She wrote back saying, no. Just like Uncle Idris was saying, he said, it doesn't matter. Even if you live in a hut, I'll be willing to live in a hut with you. Now, we courted for 3 years. I didn't see her after 3 years. And when I came, I was introduced to the family, and the family invited me. And I remember I was invited by her elder brother, who happens to be sitting to the left. I got to the house, and Malam Nuruddin and I got into a very deep philosophical conversation. And I remember asking him, we were talking about what was before time. Those are the kind of conversations we were talking about. What was before time? And then there was a question I asked that still resonates with me. I said, what is the secret of existence? And I had to remind him about 3 or 4 years ago. He said to be at peace with man and God. I found that very profound. Fast forward. Sheikh Ahmad Limu didn't like me. I wasn't in the running. He was thinking of either the son of Sheikh Ahmad Gumi or the son of, just the sheikhs. But not that. He said, does this son of a politician from where? He just came. I wasn't thinking of her. So, but I was so lucky. He liked me, and her mother liked me, and they were like, no, give Miriam what she wants. So Sheikh then said, okay, the whole family will embark on istihara. And if Allah says he's the one, that will be fine. After that long conversation with Malam Nuruddin Limu, I went back to my dad. I got to the house around 9 a.m. I didn't leave until Maghrib. And by the time I got to the house, I was shaking with hunger. They didn't give me even a glass of water. I don't know. I don't know if that was part of the test. But my father said, you mean you've been there all day long? Yes. And they didn't even feed you? I said, no, not even a glass of water. He said, okay, you better go eat. And so I said, Miriam called and said, the father said there's one condition. If the entire family and Sheikh also selected a few other scholars that he respected, can do istihara. The result of that istihara will determine if he will bless me as her husband or not. So I told my father, I said, this is what they're going to do. So he said, okay, we should do it too, but we should also incorporate 3 days of fasting to do the istihara. I said, okay, excellent. So as I was walking away, he called me back. He said, Said? I said, yes, Father. He said, will you believe in the outcome of the istihara? I was like, okay. And I said, yes. So he said, if the istihara said she's not the one, you'll walk away? I said, absolutely. Alhamdulillah, the istihara said she was the one. But the sheikh was very reluctant. It took him 3 months. I was waiting. Everybody had given their results within about 2 weeks, but sheikh 3 months. So he told me the story. And he was very honest. I really didn't like you. I was in Saudi. This particular day, he said, I was running late for Subuh prayer. I came as I was going down to the Kaaba by the Maqam Ibrahimiyya. Allah showed me, you are her husband. Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah. Fast forward to the gentleman who said, family. After he gave his blessing, I had to travel. You know how we do traditionally. You go see relatives of the bride and they introduce yourself. And we went to Lemu and I was being introduced and we were chatting. There was a lady, one of their aunts. And everybody finished saying what they had to say. Then she said to me, I'm so happy you like my niece. I'm glad, and so on. And she said, and I know they've told you all of her wonderful habits. And I said, yes. And she said, okay, I'll tell you all her bad habits. I was shocked because that was the first time you go looking for a wife and the relative says, I'll tell you all her bad habits. And she started telling me the bad habits. And I wasn't sure, did this woman like Maryam or hate Maryam? Because I thought you would expect it will be good. So she was. So when she finished, she then asked me, now that you know all her bad habits, are you still interested? And she went further to say, I will not be offended if you are not interested. I said, I am committed, I'm still interested, and I'll proceed. Then she said one thing, then promise me you'll never divorce her. I'm like, okay. So that promise was made even before the nikah. So when Maryam will tell the stories about she has interballistic missiles, her mouth and everything, it didn't matter. She will say everything, go to the heaven and come back. I'm just watching. No divorce. Because I'd already given my promise. She never understood. The really interesting part, though, that aunt really prepared me. Everything she said, I was waiting for. So I knew it was coming. The unfortunate thing that families do in hiding the truth and not helping even, tell him the truth. If he still loves her, he will work on helping her overcome those challenges. The other side, a man came to my father, interested in marrying one of my sisters. The shocking thing was my father told him, she is not suitable for you as a wife. My father, about his own daughter, he told the gentleman, no. But if you want to marry just any of my daughters, marry that one. That was tough for us because it's kind of, we really struggled to digest that. But at the end of the day, this is my blood, but my father was right. So this is a tough bullet to bite, but maybe in hindsight, maybe my father could have said, if she is the one you really want, these are the things you have to help her with. Maybe in hindsight. Because in my case, that's what I'll do. But my father just shut the door. So I just want to say families who really want nikahs of their children to be blessed, when a suitor comes, sit them down, be honest about the challenges, advise them how to go forward. If they decide to go forward, ka saukar da haƙi, between you and Allah, you've done the right thing. You've told the person, but help her. Because when it comes to marriage, it's not about just you and the woman. It's not just about you, your family, her and her family. It's about you, her, your family, her family, and the ummah. The marriage doesn't just stop with the two of you and your families. It has an impact on the ummah. So please be sincere. Guide the brides, the potential spouses, and tell them how best to go forward. But don't lie, because you can't deceive Allah. Don't lie. And that innocent person that you drop a bomb on, Wallahi Malanduru, we've had cases of girls who are drug addicts. They hide it from the groom. And then suddenly after the nikah, you're going to Pakistan on a honeymoon. They take her to a rehab center. But they don't tell the man. We lie as parents. And these marriages are not blessed. Let's be very careful. Abba Ahmed, on the question of trauma. The truth, I just wanted to not be a prisoner of my pain. That's the honest truth. And I needed a safety net, someone I could trust that I could share this with, that will help me on the journey of recovery. Throughout my life, there wasn't anybody I felt I could confidently discuss that with except my own wife. And I felt she would understand. And she also knew my challenges, my skeletons. And, if you have it, sometimes you get anger explosions. You get so many kind of things that happen. And I was trying to make her understand where they were coming from. And I was asking her to help me on the journey to recovery. Granted, there's a 12-year gap between Mariam and I. And perhaps I put her under too much pressure because she wasn't mature enough to be able to handle such a big deal. So she didn't do too well. And unfortunately, in one of our fights, she lost it and just hit me with it. And like I said, it shut me down for years. Among the people she sought advice from on that issue was her brother. When they came to visit, and she was confiding in him and their late mother that she has violated a trust and she doesn't know how to go about gaining it back. And I don't know what advice, because of the conversation they had, I don't know what advice they gave her. But many of us men worry about the maturity level, the sensitivity level, of whom we want to go to help us on this journey. Because it is a journey, you need their support. They need to give the support. They need to understand when you go off the rail and they know this is not normally you. It is that monster that's causing this. So I know your wife, she's pretty mature, and I'm sure she can. Okay, my impression. Anyway, but I think when you lay the foundation of the discussion correctly, and it's about trust, it's about confidence, it's about healing, it's about a journey together, because when you do get well, you're both beneficiaries, and so is the family as a whole beneficiaries of, the healing process. But the one thing I want to advise anybody who's experienced this is for them to understand that get on the bandwagon first to heal, but to heal others, and wallahi, as you heal others, you get better. You get stronger, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan. Habib.
Bismillah. Okay, so my question was, what's the difference between ejaculation and orgasm? Is that just specifically for men or women or both? Okay, so So ejaculation refers to actually, before I go into that, this is something that even the Prophet, peace be upon him, he affirmed in the hadith. So this hadith that's in Bukhari when Sulaim, who was the grandmother of Ishaq, and I'm sure most people have heard this hadith, when she asked the Prophet, peace be upon him, about nocturnal emissions, i.e. when a woman sees what a man sees in a dream, does she need to perform a ghusl? And when she asked the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was with Salama and Aisha. And what's interesting is the reactions of both of his wives. One of his wives, Salama, she put her hand to her face out of embarrassment. And Aisha, she said an expression as in, "You've humiliated women. How can you ask such a question?" And then the Prophet, peace be upon him, he corrected Aisha and then he answered Sulaim's question, as in affirming that women can experience what men experience, as in a wet dream, nocturnal emission, inzal, ejaculation. All right. So it's from an Islamic perspective, and this is why many of the scholars of the past, they were of the opinion and believe that women can experience ejaculation the same way men can experience ejaculation. So ejaculation refers to the expulsion of fluids from the urethra. So from the man, it's from the pee hole, and from the women, it's from where they urinate from. So it's not from the it's not from any other hole. So it's got the two holes of the woman in addition to the anus. So women can ejaculate, men can ejaculate. But in terms of what's the difference, now generally when people use the term ejaculation, they use the term orgasm interchangeably when they're different. So we know that most women, as Sheikh Nuruddin mentioned, most women do not orgasm via intercourse, but we know that a lot of women can orgasm, but most of the times they do not expel fluid, they do not ejaculate. Okay, so we know there's a clear difference. We know that women ejaculate, and we know that women can orgasm, but most women, or most of your wives who will do orgasm, inshallah, with you, not all of the time they're going to expel fluid. And the fluid I'm referring to is, well, actually there's three types. There's a vaginal excretion, which is a small type of like a white, which is not from the urethra. That's usually when a woman is wet, when you're doing the stage 3 and stage 4. So she's excited. And then there's the ejaculate, which is more thick in substance. And there's a squirting or gushing, which is large in and is quite whitish. And some women can gush up to this amount. That's squirting. That's the difference between squirting, or also used as gushing, and then ejaculate, which is a bit white and creamy in terms of the texture. So that's the difference in the substance. Now, like I said, it's possible for women to ejaculate and orgasm at the same time, or not necessarily at the same time. Likewise for men, but in the difference with men is that most cases, 9 times out of 10, when we orgasm, we also ejaculate, and that's why most men think that they don't differentiate between the two. Because most men, when they orgasm, they ejaculate, but there are many men who are able to orgasm without expelling any fluid. And this is something that many of the ancient Indians spoke about in the Tantric tradition. And there are a number of like techniques in terms of how one can have an orgasm, but not ejaculate, not expel fluid. So that's essentially the difference between the two. And you mentioned about like your previous wife, that she couldn't experience an orgasm. That's very common. And even like the problem is, because if a woman hasn't experienced an orgasm, she might think that no woman can experience an orgasm, or the man might think that because that's based on his experience, not realizing, like Sheikh Nuruddin mentioned, that most women, like I said, don't orgasm via intercourse, and there are different ways a woman can orgasm. So there's, like I mentioned in my book, there's 14 types of orgasms a woman can experience. Are you familiar with different types of female orgasms? 14. So you've got vaginal orgasm, which is orgasm via penetration. You've got clitoral orgasm, which is when you stimulate the external clitoris or internal clitoris. You've got blended orgasm, is when a woman can orgasm, like you can do the blended technique. You know about the blended technique? I'm giving you a sign with my hand. The blended technique, or the overdrive technique, where you stimulate the G-spot. You do know what the G-spot is, right? Okay, you stimulate the G-spot, and then you use your thumb to press against the external clitoris, and that's how she can have like both a vaginal orgasm and a G-spot orgasm and a clitoral orgasm. Or she can have a blended orgasm whilst when you're penetrating her, if she's stimulating the external clitoris, then obviously she can have both a vaginal orgasm and a clitoral orgasm. That's a blended orgasm. Then you've got the G-spot orgasm, which is an area, it's not an actual spot, which is about 2 to 3 inches on the upper portion of the vagina. So imagine this is a vagina, my mouth, about 2 to 3 inches. So if you're using your fingers like the come hither motion, or that's like the vaginal area. And then you've got the breast orgasm. Some women can orgasm via nipple stimulation alone. There's a kissing orgasm. There's the A-spot orgasm. Does everyone know where the A-spot is? A-spot. Okay, so the A-spot is the anterior foreneck zone. So we do know about the women's anatomy, right? Do you know about the... Okay, so the
Show some sensitivity.
Okay, I'm asking...
I'm getting homesick now.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the different, I'll quickly go through it and I'll just explain where each of these parts are. So you've got the A spot, you've got the G spot, you've got the U spot, and you've got the K spot. Okay? So the A spot is called the anterior foreneck zone, which is deep in the vagina, but before the cervix. So I'm sure you know where the cervix is. Yes? Deep in, yes? Or people just nodding. So you can stimulate the A spot with your fingers or your penis, but it's probably easier to use your fingers or you can use a toy. But it's deep in the vagina, but before the cervix, just before the cervix, right? So that's the A spot. And then you have the K spot, which I mentioned earlier. I mentioned the K spot, right? The clitoris. So the K spot refers to the clitoris, both the internal and external clitoris. So rather than calling the K spot just referring to the external hub, the external nub, the whole entire region, the clitoral structure is called the K spot. Then you have, what was the other one? U spot, which is like the urethra, where the woman urinates from. So some women orgasm by stimulating that area. That's a U spot orgasm, the A spot orgasm, the cervical orgasm, a full body orgasm, a zone orgasm. So that's like there's some women that's where you stimulate an erogenous zone that's not very common. So some women can orgasm just by stimulating the nape of their neck. Some women have the dimples of Venus. You know about the dimples of Venus? So some women have indented at the back portion. If your wife has indented marks, not every woman has got that. Some women, just by stimulating that alone, she can experience an orgasm. So again, it's about exploring your wife's body. So that's the, where was I? So vaginal, clitoral, blended, G-spot, kissing, breast, A-spot, U-spot, cervical orgasm, zone orgasm, mind orgasm. So some women can orgasm just by thinking. Or it's just like when you think about it, you can orgasm without any genital touch. Like you can orgasm whilst you're asleep. That's the type of orgasm. Full body orgasm, which is energy orgasm. And then you have the zone orgasm and the kunyaza orgasm, which is essentially an orgasm which includes ejaculation. So like I mentioned, how the orgasm and ejaculation is, all of this is in my book, by the way, but yeah, that's a quick overview. I think that was 14.
You know, Brother Habib, the first thing I'm going to go home and apologize profusely to my wife. I tell her, darling, I thought I knew the female anatomy. I'm just going for some remedial lessons. I'll be back literally with a bang,
Naughty.
Naughty.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. One of the questions has not been asked. I thought they had. Okay. Okay. What I would recommend is just meet him, inshallah. The problems keep coming. We're not going to address all. And one of the questions has to do with addiction. Addiction to gaming. You can have addiction to phone that you don't believe you have an addiction. So we'll leave that out because it came late. A lot of problems, I think, have already been handled and would be handled if you took a course in premarital counseling. Premarital counseling. Don't take marriage for granted. They say actually the number one destroyer of marriages is the assumption that the love you have and your level of knowledge is enough for it to succeed. that when you want to operate, when you want to run a project, you know you need to study. When you want to learn to drive a car, you know you need to prepare. But then when you want to marry, you think, that one, inshallah, common sense. It's not common sense. When I was to get married, I spoke to Said. Okay, we want to discuss. What would you recommend? And he suggested something very simple. Both of you sit and prepare a list of your concerns. Just concerns. I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about that. Just concerns. And hear what the other person has to say. I remember we ended up with a list of concerns of over 30-something concerns. But at the end of those discussions, you actually felt more comfortable, that you actually understood this person even better. Something that is also useful, I think, whether you are getting married or not getting married, is you can find online a number of these personality tests. Different personality tests. Ask ChatGPT, you want to get married, what personality test would you recommend? Just to give a simple one. Some are most of them are useful for business, leadership, etc. But they are very good in helping you understand yourself. You know, one of the points that Brother Mustafa was mentioning is how you really don't get to know who you married until after the marriage and over the next year or two during the storming period. But honestly, that's when you get to actually understand yourself better. Yeah. So marriage and your partner becomes a reflection. To conclude, there's going to be a lot of learning.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, a couple of people asked where they can buy my book. I forgot to mention. It's at Tarbiyah Book Plus. So Tarbiyah Book Plus, which is at 21 Blantyre. I've got some copies, but I'm not selling them, so I want to patronize Tarbiyah. So please go to Tarbiyah Book Plus. If you want to have a look at it again, you can have a look at it. But if you want to purchase, please go to Tarbiyah Book Plus. Jazakallah khairan. Oh, after all of that, Tarbiyah
Bookstore, if you just Google map it, it's behind For You, near that Barcelona hotel. So Google Maps can help. Tarbiyah Bookstore. So as we carry on with our du'as, the need to remember to tie your camel. Tie your camel. Istihara, yes, but consult. And think about what you're doing. Triangulate information. Today people have Facebook pages, they're on Instagram. Don't just ask their friends. Go and do your own independent investigation as best as you can. But also remember, there's a lot of learning on this journey. And you need humility, you need curiosity, but also compassion and empathy. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali said that friends, and I would apply that to spouses, he said friends are of 4 types. One type of friend is like food. They are good for you, and they help you grow and stay strong. And you want them every day. Some types of friends are not like food. They are like medicine. They're also good for you, but not every day. When you have a problem, that's when you go and see the doctor or get your medication. But there's another type of friend that is like a disease, like illness. They will weaken you. Things you are good at, you are no more enthusiastic about. Your growth is crippled by some of these type of friends. And the last type of friend. So we have the first one is like what? Food. The second one? Medicine. The third one? Disease and illness. And the fourth one is like poison. If they don't kill you, they'll get you killed. Yeah. They'll get you on drugs. They will start getting you to take all sorts of, do the speed driving. You will die. So it's good to ask yourself, what kind of person do you want? Because all of them can look very beautiful. All of them can be very educated. All of them can dress well and come from good families. Yeah. Even some prophets had very useless children. So just because the family is good doesn't, so really look for what you want. But ask yourself, what are you towards the other person? Are you like food? Are you like medicine? Or are you illness or actually poison? Allah says, and I will conclude with this. Inna Allaha la yugayiru ma bi qawmin hatta yugayiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not change your condition until you can change what is inside you. You cannot be liked by your wife, nor can you force her to like you if you are not more likable. You can't control her liking you, but you can control whether you are a likable person or not. You can't get her to respect you just because you are you, but you can become more respectable. You can't force people to trust you, but you can what? You can become more trustworthy, and hopefully if you are more trustworthy, they will trust you. And last, you cannot force anybody to love you, but you can do what? You can be more lovable. May Allah help us, inshallah.